What's up everybody? Welcome to this tutorial. My name is Dennis and let me show you guys what we're going to be working on today. So we're going to recreate this bacteria animation that I made, and we'll cover everything from the modeling to using hair dynamics to create these arms or tentacles, and we'll do the lighting and materials, the rendering with Octane, and composite everything in After Effects. So this should be fun, and let's just jump right into it. So here we are in Cinema, brand new scene, and first thing I want to do is to create a cube. And for my cube, let's make it a little longer and add some segments and drop it into a subdivision surface. And let's crank up the subdivision here, and this is basically the shape of our cell. Pretty simple, right? So at this point I'm going to right click and hit current state to object, and I can hide this and turn this off. So now we have a clean mesh to work with, and let's name this our cell body. Cool. With this selected, let's drop a bend deformer to it, and by default the orientation of the bend deformer is always wrong. It's super annoying, so we just have to rotate it 90 degrees this way and 90 degrees the other way, like that. I'm gonna hit fit to parent, and let's check keep white length as well as change the mode to unlimited. So now if I move the bend deformer out a little bit like that, and so we can keyframe this. But for now, let's keep this to 0, and we'll circle back later with this. So now let's add some of the stuff, looking at our reference, some of the stuff that's inside the cell, some organelles or DNA or whatever. It's nothing specific, but it's some cool stuff to look at. So to do that, I'm gonna add a helix. I'm gonna go to my right view, move this back, and let's change our radius, say 30 by 30. Let's increase the length of the helix, maybe 40 by 40, and turn down the angle so we have something like this. Okay, let's copy this, duplicate our helix, and just rotate it. Something like that. Cool. And with both of these selected, right click and hit current or connect object and delete. So now we just have a clean spline to work with this. And let's add some geometry to our spline. To do that, let's create a sweep object as well as a circle. And right now the circle is way too big, so let's make it, let's say 10. And let's drop the circle and the helix spline both into a sweep, and now we have some geometry to work with. And under the details option for my sweep, there's a curve for the scale. So let's just add some points to this to create some more randomness to our sweep. Again, it doesn't have to be anything like specific. You just want to add some, make things look a little more organic, you know, something like that. Yeah, something like that. I mean, we can always swing back and play with this later if we feel like it, but I think it's pretty good for now, and let's just keep moving. So in addition to this helix, or let's call it our DNA, let's add some just like floating organelle stuff. So to do that, let's create a sphere and scale this down, and drop this into a cloner object. Change the mode to object, and let's just reference our helix we made, and just check render instances. Let's crank up the account, and with our cloner object selected, we can go to MoGraph, effectors, and random effector. So this just creates some randomness in the position you can create randomness in the position, scale, or rotation. So we have position selected. I'm gonna zero out this first and just kind of like crank this up, something like that. Cool. And we can do a little same thing with the scale. And another thing I like to do is with my sphere, I'm just going to duplicate the sphere and just scale that down. So duplicate that again, scale that down. So just create some more variations within the cloner, and even in here under clones, we can change this to random. So pretty much the idea is to create more randomness so that things feel a little more organic, and you can crank up the account too. And at this point, I think we're good. Maybe we can have all of these selected. Maybe scale everything up a little bit as well, like that. I don't know. You know what? I think it's good for now. And if we need to make adjustment, we can always swing back. So let's call this my cell organs. Cool. So we have our DNA, our cell organs, and our body, and let's create a null and drop everything into a null, and let's call our null our cell. Okay. So at this point, I am going to create a camera. Let's create a camera, and under coordinates, I'm going to zero out all my coordinates and rotation, and just move this camera back, and make sure I'm looking through the camera, and make sure that I'm going to change my focal length to 50. So now, because this animation, I'm not really moving the camera, it's just kind of like a stationary camera. We can just, let's see. First of all, I'm going to rotate my cell this way, and I am going to lock my camera by adding a protection tag to the camera so that I can accidentally move it. And we can just keyframe, do a little animation for our cell. So right now I'm working in HD 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second. So we can do 144 frames, 6 seconds. Should be fine. So let's keyframe our cell, something like this in the beginning. Maybe a position and rotation. Let's go down a couple frames. Move it down. Maybe do a little more rotation like that. Keyframe, keyframe. And let's just move it out like this. Maybe rotate like that. Let's play this back. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I mean, of course, for my own example, when I did this, you spent a lot more time finessing the animation and whatnot, right? But I think for the tutorial, I'm just showing you the general gist, so we can just, because there are a lot of stuff to cover. So I think that's pretty good. I'm just gonna bring up my curve editor real quick for my keyframes, and I'm just gonna make the end here a little more, because right now it's easing to a stop kind of, so I just want to make that more linear. And let's show out tracks and just make sure that I am okay. Cool. Let's play this back real quick. Yeah, I almost feel like I want to rotate the other way, the rotation, but it doesn't really matter, so we're good. And remember the band deformer we had before? Let's do some keyframe here. So maybe we'll start at frame 12. Let's keyframe the strength. at this point, let's gonna rotate a little up like this. Okay, keyframe, and go back to 0. Oh, and the problem right now, I might have to put this outside of the body into the cell itself, because right now it's not affecting the DNA part and the organelles. But now, when you just drop it inside the null object, it affects everything within it, like so. Let's see. Cool. So this is just add a little secondary kind of animation to this. All right, and again, I'm doing this very quickly, and if you're following along, you know, feel free to finesse this. And okay, I think we're good. So let's keep moving. Next thing I want to do is to add these little hairs to our object. So that's gonna be fun. So with our cell body selected, I am going to go to simulate hair object and add hair. And without doing anything, let's just play this back and see what this feels like. Okay, looks like a shaggy dog. Not bad. So let's go into our hair and let's play with some of the settings here. So right now the count is, well, let's turn it down a little bit. Turn that down and change the root from vertex to area. And the count, let's crank this out. I mean, let's half it, like say 400 for now. And let's hit regrow. Okay. Under hairs, for roots, I'm going to change this to as guides. And nothing here. And I'm going to generate some splines so that we can use a sweep object later to add some geometry. Nothing I need to do here. Under forces, you want to turn this gravity, because right now it has its default gravity set here. I'm just going to 0 this. And I think we're okay for now. Let's just play this back again. Oh. Okay, so it's doing something crazy. I think that's because we have to change the priority here from generator to animation. Okay, cool. Okay, that's not bad, not bad. One thing with these hairs though, if you I don't want it to move too much, so I'm going to change the segment. First of all, let's make this a little longer, make it a little more. We can regrow and change the segment to, like, say 3. Let's play this back now. Okay, cool. Now it's a little more, feels a little more stiff. Before it's a little too floppy. Okay, that feels pretty good. With hair objects, what's cool about it is it also works with all these forces from the Cinema 4D's default particle system. So I'm gonna add a turbulence to this thing and just crank up the scale and just see if I can get some more, a little more movements. Yeah, okay. And let's crank this, like, say 50. See what that just to see what that looks like. Oh yeah, look at that. It's moving kind of crazy now, huh? So maybe not that strong. Say a little 10. You just want something a little subtle, you know, just so that it feels like it's more in kind of a little fluid environment. Okay, cool. That's pretty good. Let's rename this our short hair. So that's our short hair, and let's add some of the bigger long ones. So I'm going to duplicate this. I call this my long hair. And with this, we can do the count. Let's just do like 5 to begin with. Turn up the length, and under advanced there's a seed here, so I'm gonna just change the seed a little bit and regrow so that it's not in the same position. And for these long ones, you want to make sure that you have a lot more segment, because when you have less segments here, it feels more stiff. So if I play this back, it's not moving as much, right? So actually, I'm going to change the seed again. Regrow. And if I crank the segment, I always say, let's say 12. Play this back. So now that feels a lot more organic. So maybe if I even more, say like I don't know, 18, and make it even longer. Yeah, okay. That's not bad. And so, you know, you're just kind of like playing, kind of trial and error. Oh, okay, that looks a little better as far as what the position of these guys are. Cool. And another thing I might want to do is, maybe I make this even a little longer. I want to, in addition to the turbulence, maybe add a let's go to simulate particles. Maybe add a little friction to our scene. It's just to dampen everything. Okay, yeah, see, that feels a little more like it's kind of in some kind of a fluid. And within the hair itself, I think under dynamics, you have this drag function. Maybe we turn that to 5. Okay, cool. So I mean, that's kind of the idea, and you can always just, again, you can spend a lot of time just finessing these numbers and just to get something that feels good. But that's approximately the idea here. So I think I'm gonna call it good and just keep moving because we have more things to cover. So I'm gonna save my work. And right now with these hairs, they're just hairs, right? So let's add some geometry. Oops. Like this. So that's, again, like I said, pretty simple. We're gonna create our sweep object, and let's create a circle. Where's my circles? Yep. Let's make this really small, say 2. And I'm gonna change the intermediate point to uniform and make it like 1. Let's drop this in and drop the short hair in here. And I'm just gonna go out on my camera real quick and look at this. And once again, under details for my sweep, I can change the scale here. Oops. So, oh, what the fuck? Okay. Cool. Do that again. Circle and sweep. Once again, let's make the circle say 5 or something. Change the intermediate point to uniform and say 1. And the reason I do that is to keep my scene light, right? So if I go back here to these guys, if I turn the number here, you'll have more geometry, but you might slow down your scene. So they're so small, so I just keep them small like this. And let's drop this long hair in here. Boom. And once again, we're gonna play with the scale here. Okay, let's go back to our camera and maybe even bigger. I don't know. I think maybe I just keep this more linear. Let's keep this linear. Let's You know what? This is fine. Okay. Let's pay this back. I think that looks pretty cool. What do you think? It's pretty cool. So I might even want to make my radius a little thicker. It looks like one of those robots from The Matrix. I don't know if you've seen that movie. Okay. I think we're good. So I'm going to call it good for now, and again, we can always swing back and deal with this. So I'm going to call this let's rename this to keep things organized. Short hair, my long hair, and okay. And another thing to think about, and I don't think I need it, but sometimes if the hair is intercepting with your cell body, what you can do is you can just click this and add a let's see, add a hair collider. So, but I don't think you can really tell. So that, at least from what I'm saying, so we don't need that, you know, to speed up our animations. So at this point, let's get into doing some rendering. Okay, so anytime you're doing rendering, at least for me, it's always good to have some references to look at. So, oops, let's see. So I will look at E. coli micrograph. That's kind of the references I was looking at. And if you look at these images, they're pretty like I mean, they look pretty cool, but they're very flat as far as the lighting goes. So that's something to keep in mind. And these are more electron micrographs, but that's not the look I was going for. So something like that. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to use Octane to render this. So I am going to change my layout. But before I do that, real quick. So this is my cell body. I am going to duplicate this guy, make it a little thicker, and I'm going to add that into a cloth surface. So if I'm moving here, I don't need the subdivisions. So this is going to be my outer memory, right? So I'll call this my outer memory. This is my inner body. And you'll see why later. So let's for my when I'm working in Octane, I have a custom layout, so I'm gonna load that in real quick. And without doing it, I mean, this is just default settings. And when I'm working Octane, I like to keep this a little small first. Lock the resolution and just see what everything looks like. And this is as you expect by default. So like I said, the lighting is very flat, right? So I'm just gonna add a basic texture environment, and this is just gonna be my actually just gonna be my lighting. I'm not gonna add any lights to our scene, and I'm gonna change my mode from direct lighting to path tracing. Just feel like that works a little better. I'm going to change that to 200 sample max for now, and turn the GI clamp to say 1. Check static noise, and cool. So let's start making our materials. And I'm going to create a specular, default specular material. I'm going to call this my clear glass material. Right, so I am going to apply that to the inner body and the outer body for now. And let's just go in here and start playing with some of the settings here. So first thing I want to do is check fake shadows, and let's turn the transmission all the way up. Okay, be a little something like that, and I think we're good for now. So I'm going to duplicate this material. I'm going to call this my blur glass, and it's pretty much the exact same thing, but just add a little roughness with this. Next, I'm going to create a mixed material. I'm going to call this my inner body, and I am going to apply the clear glass to it, and I'm going to create a illumination material, light inner, and under emissions for this material, add a black body emission. Oops, black body. Check this, and for my mixed material, I'm gonna throw that in. And for how we mix this, I'm gonna use a fall off map. So let's now apply that to my inner body. And let's go in here for my black body and just turn down the power a little bit. And for my fall off map, we can play with some of the settings here. Just play with it. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to duplicate this mixed material. I'm going to call this my outer membrane. And I am going to switch the clear glass to my blur glass and apply this to the outer membrane. Okay. Right, okay. And let me just double check. And again, you can go in here to the light and just play with the power. Okay, cool. I'm gonna make just a diffuse material and just make it black, the color, and I'm gonna apply that to my DNA and the organs, like that. Okay. And if I go to my blur glass here, maybe I don't need, I can play with the roughness. Maybe I just need a little bit of roughness, like that. Cool. I'm going to duplicate this mixed material again. I'm going to call this my tentacles, or the hairs, or whatever. And let's apply that to the short hair and the long hair. And I am going to I'm going to duplicate this light as well. And I'm going to call this my tentacle light. So let's replace that and go in here and play with the power here again. Maybe crank this up, and yeah, there you go. So now it's a little more prominent. And also we can play with the fall off. The fall off here. And I think I'm going to change my environment to something a little darker so we can see that a little better. Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, so again, it's just a matter of kind of like fine-tuning these settings. But that's the general gist, and I think for the short amount of time that we worked on this, is pretty good. It's pretty good. And I want these hairs to look a little more prominent. So maybe I go all the way to the beginning, and what I'm gonna do for my short here is I'm gonna even make the guides a little longer, and for my sweep object, make it a little thicker as well. And let's go down here, and maybe for my fall off, yeah, okay. Oops. Kind of just tweaking these numbers. Okay, cool. I mean, this is kind of the fun part, right? You just kind of like play with these values and see what you get. But that is pretty much at this point is kind of what I'm looking for. It's pretty close to what we had, and obviously there are a lot of other things that I did, but I think let's just keep moving. So at this point, I'm just gonna render out this sequence. But before that, though, let's do something else. Let's add a Octane camera tag to my camera. I'm not gonna really do anything with this, but I think I'm just gonna leave it. I mean, this looks pretty good as it is, so I'm just gonna probably just leave it as it is. And let me see. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna try it. So under Camera Imager, you have the option to enable the AI denoiser. So let's just take a look, see if it makes a difference. Because right now we're running really quick, and it's 4 seconds per frame, so it's, let's see. I mean, okay, let's change it to the actual resolution I'm gonna use at, which is 1080. 1920 by 1080. And we're only doing 200 samples, so it takes about 9 seconds to render this. Oh yeah, so it does make a small difference. See the noise factor? I don't know if you can tell, but what if so the idea is to optimize your render time. So if the less sample you have, the faster it goes, and the idea is to try to get it to as low as possible as far as the render time, and still looks decent. So let's see. Yeah, okay. I think I am good. You know what I noticed? There's a little jaggeding here. That's probably just the amount of resolution, but I'm gonna ignore that and just go ahead and render the sequence at 150 frames. So to do that, I am first save my scene, change my settings to Octane, make sure I use the denoise path as my beauty pass. Let's render all frames, and let's set a place to save as. So make sure I am saving into, where is E. coli tutorial. Let's create a new folder called render, and I'm going to call this E. coli beauty pass. Okay, now I'm going to render, and I'll pause this and I'll be back when it's done. Hey, and we're back, and we have finished our renders, and let's take a look at that. I've actually loaded this into After Effects, and let's just take a look, and I think that looks pretty dope. So I think we're ready to, actually before we start working on the compositing stuff, one more thing I want to do is to create a matte for just our cell. And to do that, I am actually going to just go ahead and use the standard render engine and use the object buffer system here. So I'm going to select my cell and I'm going to add a compositing tag and enable object buffer 1. I'm going to copy that to my here, the two fibers as well, and I'm going to change this back to standard like I was saying. Enable multipass and add a object buffer, and let's just do a quick render test to picture viewer. And if we go into layers and we see that we have our object buffer. Actually, we might not even need that because we have the alpha, but let's just use this. So let's render out the sequence. So I'll put all frame save. I don't need the regular image, just need the multipass, and I'm just gonna save a JPEG. And let's go into our folder and add this our cell mat, and let's just do a quickly render this. It should be fairly quick. While this is rendering, I'm gonna go into After Effects, and in here I have the beauty pass we just rendered right here. I also have a couple of textures that I will be using. So this is a dirty glass texture that I just found on Google that I've been using for a long time. So if you go in Google and look up dirty glass texture, there's a bunch, or grunge textures, and I found these guys here. So just go ahead and download these. These are free. And another thing that I will be using is this particle video, stock video. It's a free one that Andrew Kramer from Video Copilot has released from 2011. It's called free whatever flower or particle systems. It's free. Just go ahead and download this, and we should be good to go. So this is almost done, and let this finish real quick. Couple more seconds. I know that in Octane it has its like multipass system to do all this stuff, but I just found it really inconsistent. I don't know, maybe I don't know how to use it properly, but the standard Cinema 4D multipass system is great. You know, this is what I use, what I know, and it should be done. So I'm just gonna go ahead and load that in. I'm gonna import that. So let's go find our render. Okay, so let's drop this in, and everything should match or track perfectly. Okay, perfect. And I'm gonna save my project. Okay, so the reason I'm using the object buffer pass is so that I can just isolate the cell by itself from the background if I want to do some color correction, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I call this just my cell, and I'm going to apply an effect called Set Matte, and I'm going to select the object buffer and use the luminance. So if I isolate this, now we have our cell by itself. Yep, so that's that. And with this, let's just add a curves to it. We can add a curves, and maybe it's boost the contrast a little bit like that. And the way I had it before, let's just look at my reference. So there are a lot of small, like kind of like environmental stuff going on, and that's all just from the texture. So let's just drop one in the background like that, and So the way I would do it is, let's go, first of all, I'm going to invert this image, right? I'm going to add curves. Like that. And another thing I will want to do, and I'm just going to turn this off for now, I'm going to set the blending mode to multiply, and I am going to add a turbulence displace effect to this. So what that does is, let's make the amount really small and the size really small. So this, if I keyframe the evolution, move, or you just create these little random, or kind of like a little distortion, and we can even crank up the complexity. So let's just keyframe this real quick. Set a keyframe at the beginning, go to the end. Let's make it like, I don't know, 2 revolutions. So we'll have these little small kind of movements, and you can just like play with these numbers, get something a little subtle. And oftentimes I will go ahead and duplicate this effect, change the random seed, and maybe play with the numbers again. Maybe make the size a little smaller. So you just have this little kind of like floaty kind of a thing going on in the back. Another thing you can do is I can keyframe the scale as well. So a little subtle scale action here. And now I can add, say, a fast blur or a fast box blur. Check repeat edges and just crank that up. Not so much. So we'll have some stuff in the back, and we can play with the opacity as well. Okay. And I can drop the other one on top of it, like this. And for this one, once again, I can add the curves to crush this whole thing a little bit. And let's screen this on top of it. Cool. And let's just copy our turbulent displace effects onto this, so that you will have, what? Huh. Okay, let's move this back. There you go. Now we have some movement as well. Like that. Scale that up. And maybe crush it even more. Like that. Okay, cool. And once again, we can add a fast box blur to this. So you kind of just add some, like, just stuff, right? So that it looks like it's in something. Maybe I want to increase the blur effect more. And one of the effects I was using initially too is, well, actually, this is a cool effect. It's called autofocus. It's a third-party plugin from Freshloop. I think you can have a if you don't have that, you have a lens blur effect by just from the default After Effects, which kind of works the. So I'm going to turn off the fast blur real quick. Isolate this. Yeah, so this actually creates a nice kind of a lens blur, but if you have it, I prefer to use the out of focus one because I think it gives a better effect. So to fake kind of a rack focus kind of effect, what I had in the beginning, right? So what I did with that is I just keyframed the radius, go down a couple frames, and just blur that out real big. And I am going to create a adjustment layer and do this reverse, same thing. Let's just crank this up, everything in the back, keyframe, and as the texture blurs blurs out, let's bring this down to 0. Oh, wrong effect. 0. What the hell? Sorry. There. So this just creates a kind of a fake rack focus. Okay. And what else did I do? And at this point, you kind of just like start playing with the effect. So I think maybe I added a slight, just a slight blur, maybe 1 pixel to my thing. Oh, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe I duplicated this cell. And the bottom one, I add a fast blur. Just kind of add a little glow effect in the back, kind of like that. Let's add a black solid to the overall thing, and I'm going to my circle tool, double click, subtract, and I am just feather this out to create kind of a vignette kind of a effect here. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another solid, make it white, do the same thing, but this time I'm going to feather this out and maybe shrink that in a little bit. I'm going to pre-comp this. I'm going to call this my depth of field map. It's going here, and let's create another black solid and put it on the back. Let's go back and let's create a overall adjustment layer. I'm gonna call this my depth of field. So, oops, depth of field. Again, this is another third-party plugin from Freshloop. I think you can use the lens blur. I think you might use the lens blur for this as well. You can just pick the map and let's see. Yeah, invert it. Yeah, so it does kind of the same thing, but the depth of field effect from Freshloop is a great plugin that I've been using forever. So I'm gonna select the map, picking somewhere in the middle. I kind of just like crank up, blur out the size a little bit. You know, at this point, it's just like I can duplicate maybe this layer and maybe rotate it 180, crank that up, and maybe turn down the opacity. So really, just the idea is just duplicate all these textures several times, turn it, rotate it, scale it, change the opacity to create the build complexity. Well, there's an airplane going over my house right now, and it's gone. Right? So doing this way, you have multiple layers of just, you know, of detail. to give some life to this whole thing. Let's add an overall adjustment. I'm gonna call that my color correction. And I'm gonna go back here too. And just feather, make it a little bigger. Let's go back. Maybe just something subtle. And we can add a boost a little contrast, and you know, you can change the color here to whatever you want. So maybe add a little blue, turn that down. I don't know. Yeah, have fun with it. So let's see. Yeah, so at this point it's up to you to color it how you want, but you know, looks pretty good to me. Something like that. Just give it a little color. Maybe add a little glow effect. Add a little glow. Crank this whole thing up. Turn down the power. Turn down the power a little bit. Cool. And something else I did is I'm going to add a kind of a graying effect. So click add graying, and this would just make everything look a little more I don't know, cinematic. So let's change the preview mode to final. Nice. And you know, we can play with the intensity, maybe lower it down. But I think I like it up like that. So let me play with this. Okay, so I'm gonna run preview this, and let's see how this looks. I'm gonna pause this as I run preview. Okay, we're done run previewing, and let's take a look and see what we got. All right, I think that looks pretty cool. A couple more things we can do. Well, just a few more things. We can add our this particle thing that we got from Video Copilot, and maybe I can rotate this 180, and let's add a curves editor or curves to it, and just make it, let's crush it a little bit, and let's go in time and enable time remapping, and let's just make it so that it goes all the way to the end. Okay, and let's add this onto our shot. So it's just something like small and subtle that's going on here. Oops. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the idea. So I think that's it. I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial, and I will see you next time.